Welcome to Blaze News, The Mandate, Day 1. Tonight, we'll set the framework for Trump versus the administrative state. Ever since Donald Trump descended on that golden escalator, he declared war on more than just the political establishment. He took aim at the bureaucracy that's been pulling the strings for decades. This isn't just about Democrats or Republicans. This is about the deep state, those career insiders, the unelected bureaucrats, and all the players who've built an entire system to serve themselves, not the American people. Trump didn't just threaten their power, he exposed it. From weaponized intelligence agencies spying on his campaign to politically motivated investigations, the deep state made it clear they'd rather burn it all down than let an outsider like Trump expose their corruption. Now, as he returns for a second term, he's made one thing abundantly clear. He's not here to play nice. He's here to dismantle the swamp for good. Whether it's gutting the DEI agenda or unleashing the truth about what really happens behind closed doors, this isn't just Trump versus the deep state. It's a fight for the soul of America. And that's what we're here to document. Tonight's agenda. It's only day 3 of Trump's second term, and the shock and awe we were promised is definitely here. The president is wasting no time reshaping the federal government and positioning America for a comeback on the global stage. Trump is sending a clear message on immigration enforcement. ICE has been unleashed with full authority to go after criminals who've entered the country under Biden's watch. Border Czar Tom Homan announced that ICE is already making moves.
Right now, as we said repeatedly, and the President Trump's been clear, we're concentrating on the worst first, the public safety threats and national security threats. And just yesterday, in the last 24 hours, ICE arrested over 308 serious criminals. Some of them were murderers, some of them were rapists, some of them raped a child, some were sexual assault of a child. So ICE is doing their job, and they're prioritizing just as the president said they would. So the ICE is performing excellent right now out in the field, and they're going to continue every day.
Today, the Trump administration has ordered border agents to begin deporting illegal arrivals without holding any asylum hearings, meaning that if you come here illegally, you can get sent right back. And Border Patrol will have help, too. According to multiple reports, the Pentagon is sending up to 1,500 active duty troops to help secure the southern border. Other executive orders include overturning an Obama-era policy at the FAA and reinstating merit-based hiring. He's also taking a wrecking ball to the DEI offices across the federal agencies. And if that's all not enough, Trump repealed LBJ's affirmative action executive order, replacing it with merit-based hiring for federal contractors and banning racial discrimination and hiring practices for taxpayer-funded institutions. In just a few days, Trump is making big moves, signaling that this administration is all about action. Now, with more, let's welcome Matthew Peterson, editor-in-chief of Blaze News. So, Matthew, we were there in Washington, D.C. just at this time yesterday, and we got to see all of the frenzy, all of the excitement, everything that was happening up there on Capitol Hill. And Trump right now, he's moving at such a rapid pace. How long is he going to be able to keep this kind of momentum going?
Well, I mean, not forever, but as long, it's in his interest to keep it going as long as possible, because it's sort of like the beginning of a race, but there's no obstacle. There's no one else he's racing against right now, right? I mean, right now he has the momentum. There's not a lot of opposition. So the further and farther he pushes, the better. He won't be able to keep this up forever, but the first 90 days is always a good measure of time to sort of gauge, how an administration gets out of the gate. And you can look at the first 10 days, you can look at the first 90 days. We'll be doing both here together. But I think if you look at what we've done in the last 3 days, what we're witnessing right now, you see exactly what we've been talking about, right? Over and over again the last week is this administration is prepared. These people are working hard. They already had a lot of this planned. There's still more stuff to come. And so at the very least, we're talking night and day between now and 2016.
We're on the emails for all the Trump team, official documents that come out, all the press releases that they have. And it's promises made, promises kept, and they keep it just like that, right? This is the promise that Trump made to the American people. And here's the executive order that is going alongside that. And you can see just so many of these emails. I can't even keep up with them all right now, Peterson. I don't know how the White House, how this staff is in place going through it, because it's hard for us to even just list all of them that are on here. Like we only touched the very brief surface of what Trump and his team have been able to do so far.
Yeah, and I mean, you can look at the first volley. You're exactly right, by the way. Very hard to keep up. Every single one of these could be something that we talk about at length, ad nauseum, right? But in the beginning, you have this sort of machine gun spray of executive orders, especially, and they are targeted. They're all targeted at certain targets, so they're not random, right? They've been thinking about this for a while, and it will take some time to unpack what the result is. As Chris Bedford was telling our audience the other day with us when we were in DC, you know, these things can just be kind of a PR piece, right? You can write an executive order and then nothing happens. So I don't think that's going to happen in most cases here, but you know, there's going to be repercussions, and the mushroom cloud is just developing. What you're seeing now is the dazzling light of all the missiles that Trump has launched into the deep state, right? So there's a lot more to come and a lot more to unpack in the coming days.
Yeah, and it's funny because we look at everything that Trump was able to get done while he was just entering office, but you know, everybody's still talking about Joe Biden somehow because he's still lingering on even days later. We know that he went through and announced some pardons for his family. Let's listen to Speaker Mike Johnson talk about just that.
It was shocking. I mean, it was shocking what President Biden did on the way out, pardoning his family for more than a decade of whatever activity, any nonviolent offenses. It was breathtaking to us. I don't think that's anything like that's ever been anticipated. And by the way, go look at the tape. You know, 4 years ago, when it was just implied that President Trump might do something similar, they were apoplectic. Joe Biden himself, Adam Schiff, Chuck Schumer. Roll the tape. They all said that would be crazy and unconscionable, and now they're cheering it along. To us, it is disgusting. To us, it probably proves the point, the suspicion that, you know, they call it the Biden crime family. If they weren't the crime family, why do they need pardons, right? Look, there's a lot of attention that's going to be paid to this, and I think that is appropriate, and we will be looking at it as well.
We will be looking at it as well here, Mike Johnson. That's going to be a very interesting path to walk down because it is something that they accused Donald Trump of potentially doing on his way out of office the first time. And now you see, again, it's always projection with the Democrats, and they were the ones that actually did it this time around.
Yeah, he mentions all those people. I mean, Joe Biden said he wasn't going to do this. I mean, that was terrible. I mean, so the important thing to grasp about this is that what we don't want, the reason we have to stay on this is not just because of the Biden crime family. It's because this cannot be the way that our system runs. So we cannot have a system in which this is okay. And right now in Washington, D.C., it is okay. How do you know that? The President of the United States and his family are allowed to make money off of foreign governments, to make millions of dollars by virtue of holding the office. So we need to get real about this. Either you start paying these people millions of dollars to hold office. Maybe we should create noble titles and Duke and Knight people. Or you say, no, this is not going to be business as usual. You punish them and you make sure it doesn't happen again. But, you know, it's representative of a very corrupt, dare I say, administrative state, large fourth branch of government. But this is how it works now. This is how it operates now. So we have to stop this, or we will lose any semblance of Republican government.
Well, you know what? I think that we're going to have a couple words to say on that over the next coming weeks, months, and so on. You know what? But if Hunter Biden, maybe he can go back and get his art career going. He's such a good artist. He's going to be able to make the millions of dollars as an artist moving forward.
I mean, I'm actually really envious of him because I think that's the best way to launder money. I mean, it's like everyone has to say, oh, that's a really good painting and give you $500,000. It's not a bad way to fly, really, you know?
Listen, it's good work if you can get it. But we're going to tell you when we come back what Blaze News Tonight, the mandate, is going to look like moving forward. Don't go anywhere. Well, it's a new year, and we want to focus on what matters most. That's creating healthy habits and enjoying good moments with your family, and definitely spending less money going out to eat. Well, GoodRanchers.com, they're here to help you turn all of your resolutions into solutions. So when you buy your meat from Good Ranchers, you're directly supporting local farms and ranches in the United States, and you can skip the chaos and the imported meat from the grocery store. Good Ranchers delivers high-quality, 100% American meat straight to your door, so you can start 2025 off with better choices, better meals, and even better moments at home. Visit GoodRanchers.com and use my code Jill to claim $25 off, free express shipping, and your choice of free ground beef, chicken, or salmon in every order for an entire year. If spending more time with your family and less money going out to eat and enjoying all that quality, nutritious American food, if that's on your New Year's resolution, then visit GoodRanchers.com and use my code Jill today for meat that delivers just that. GoodRanchers.com. Use code Jill to claim $25 off and free meat in every box for a year. GoodRanchers.com. American meat delivered. President Trump has made it clear that dismantling the deep state is one of his top priorities, but how will he go about doing that? Chris Bedford is our Blaze senior politics editor, and he joins us now as we start this discussion. So, Chris, before we dive into everything, let's start with a definition of the deep state. Who exactly are we talking about? Because this thing is so big and so massive, I think we need a little bit more explanation first.
It is big, it is massive, and what makes its defining characteristic is that it's essentially permanent. Deep state are often those nameless people who exist within the functions of government. Some of them just are the ones you know better, may go from administration to administration. But others are beyond their reach. They're the staffers. They're the people who ensure continuity. So another term for them sometimes is the blob, the people who, doesn't matter if Democrats or Republicans, conservatives or liberals or moderates are in control, they basically maintain that everything goes along the same way that they always wanted to, that the alliances that they care for continue, that the money that's being spent continues, that no one messes with that the relationships with the arms dealers and arms manufacturers continue, and that no one tries to mess with that you not reach out to countries that the blob has deemed to be unacceptable, and they will do anything they can to derail that. They'll leak to the press. They'll go around you. And a lot of the time, what they'll do is simply not do anything. You can give an order, and they'll just sit there. And there's also these different rules that have come in that make it difficult to fire these people. Sometimes because of federal employee protections, for example. People have to realize it wasn't some person you'd ever heard of who went after conservative organizations to try and deny them their tax-exempt status. It was Lois Lerner, a midwit bureaucrat in the IRS who was able to actually cause that much damage. Basically, it's the idea that there are these permanent folks who go from administration to administration, who serve essentially the liberal world order and don't allow for any kind of change to that, who will sabotage anyone who tries to stop it.
All right, so that's a good explanation of who the players are, Matt. I want to know from you, because we hear it, right? It's entrenched, it's political, it's going to be here for a very long time. So this is going to be a huge task for Donald Trump going up and trying to fight this. So how did this whole thing get started?
Well, how much time you got? Our story begins. No, this is a really essential question, because I think everyone knows what the deep state is now in some way. They don't maybe know as much as Chris just laid out, but they have a sense that we're talking about unaccountable bureaucrats. But really, this is why I'm at this network, because Glenn Beck, some time ago, realized and taught a generation on the right that the progressives over a century ago were the ones who created the fourth branch of government. And what you have to understand is that the big picture here, not to get philosophical, but I will, is that the big picture here is that over 100 years ago, you had people reject the principles of the American founding and the older notion of government and say we needed an expert class of experts in various fields, because modern society is very complicated. We need social science. We need PhDs. We need people with credentials, with expertise in different parts of the world to come into the federal government and regulate and rule us. And this is what led to what Chris is talking about. The idea is that No, it's too complicated for, politics to rule everything. So we need a civil service, people who take the exams, who are credentialed, and you can see the argument for it. Otherwise, you're just going to have dueling politicians and one side wins. But this is more it's more important than that. We need to transcend partisan politics, and that's why we need this expert class. So that is Woodrow Wilson. That is ultimately FDR remaking the American form of government. I think it's not an exaggeration to say that the government under which we live now has already been refounded from the earlier American Republic. This is not the government of the Constitution, right, that we conservatives talk about and learn about in school. It's been remade over the last century, creating a fourth branch of government that is unaccountable, as Chris just laid out. And that class of people, they think they rule the world. And so here we are, right, with Donald Trump coming into office, attempting to do what no Republican president has yet been able to do. Ever since the end of World War II, the rise of modern conservatism, the goal has been, how do you restrain or tame this large-scale government, right, that is increasingly unaccountable? And when Trump shows up the first time, right, what does that government do? It absolutely rejects him and attacks him in unprecedented ways. And so now here we are. Can Donald Trump do what no Republican president has been able to do yet? Tame that thing.
Build off what you just said, Matt. It's important because no one has tried to do it. I mean, allegedly, these people are employed by the executive branch and overseen by the legislative. But the legislature hasn't really actually practiced oversight of the executive branch in 30 years. They've even lost the muscle memory how to do it. There are so few people there who take oversight seriously. They take appropriation seriously, but they don't actually take oversight seriously. They write laws and they let other people figure it out. In the executive branch, even under Ronald Reagan, a great president, he chose one aspect of the deep state that he wanted to go after. He wanted to go after the Cold War apparatus, those who wanted to keep us on the current path of simple containment. He didn't want to do that. He wanted to push the Soviet Union. He wanted to increase conflict around the world in order to bankrupt them. He wanted to cut off oil. He didn't want containment and peace. He wanted victory. And he declined to go after other aspects of the deep state. Because of that, even under Reagan and afterwards, government continued to grow. And you didn't see H.W. Bush or George W. Bush or Bill Clinton go after it either. In some ways, their agendas weren't really impacted by this. But that's how you notice Republicans win, Democrats win, Republicans win, Democrats win, conservatives, liberals, but the government just continues to grow and the excesses continue to grow. And that is because of that administrative state you just laid out.
Yeah, we've seen spineless Republicans for such a long time. And I think that's why the three of us and many of us, those in our audience, are so excited right now for Donald Trump to come in and actually have a real fighting chance, the only chance that we may ever get in our adult lives. It could be a very long walk down from here. That's why we wanted to go through and really emphasize this and do Blaze News, the mandate. So, Matthew, why don't you go ahead and walk us through a little bit more about what you want to see here?
Well, I think with what you just heard all three of us say, I mean, what we realize is we're just looking at the scene just like our audience, right? And Trump's mandate is really about, can he roll back this monstrosity? Can he tame the federal government, but it's also the NGO complex around it. It's also the established classes right around this thing who regard themselves as part of one uniparty, the blob, which is a pejorative, but these people do regard themselves as part of a system that works in a sort of apolitical way where they end up ruling over time. It's not about Republican and Democrat anymore. At this point, it is about, can Trump and the Trump administration and this large coalition tame, reform, and refound the American Republic in a way that brings it back to the principles of the early American Republic. Some people say that can't be done, and they make plausible arguments. But we are now in the best position we have ever been in to actually achieve this goal and create Republican governance worthy of the name in the 21st century. And, Chris, Charlie Kirk, everyone from Chris Bedford to Charlie Kirk, Jack Posobiec, et cetera, were all part of the Claremont Institute programs that I was part of. And we were all part of it for the same reason. I was to teach in those, and we revamped those programs for the modern age because Claremont for a long time was one of the only places on the right that was pointing this out as a problem. And the one thing that unites all of us is seeing this problem. And now it unites the base. It unites a bigger coalition than just Maha, like of interested parties and people. And we need to make sure that that mandate is implemented and keep the administration accountable and our eyes on the prize, because almost every issue that we talk about politically should be framed around this one.
Yeah, we have Chris out there in Washington, D.C. We have Rebecca Zelko also with him out there. We need to use you guys a little bit more, right? We want you to go out there and get all of that work done in D.C. That, you know, we're warm again in Dallas, Chris. I don't know if you know this or not, but it's not as cold as it is in D.C.
Warmer.
So we're going to let you
Our
go
pipes in the office
walk
are
around
frozen.
the swamp out there for us, okay?
Absolutely. We'll get through the ice. I mean, I couldn't get the office above 60 degrees today, and the pipes are frozen. We have no water. You know, it reminds me of growing up, actually, in Boston. I kind of like it.
The door was so frozen yesterday, Chris, that when I left the office, it wouldn't even close. I had to call you and say, I don't know, my Uber is here, I gotta go. So I hope that everything got straightened out there. But don't go anywhere, Bedford. We're gonna keep you around because we need you really to go through and tell us about Trump's J6 pardons and what he exposed about DC. Stay tuned. On his first day back in office, Donald Trump pardoned over 1,500 January 6th protesters and prisoners, and most of the Washington, D.C., most of the people had no reaction to it. So, Chris, you wrote about this in your latest Beltway brief. After 4 years of congressional investigations, we saw all the FBI witch hunts. Why was there just such this lackluster response to these Donald Trump pardons?
Now, we used to see, anything remotely like this would have just received howls of execration from the corporate media, from the politicians. All of those so obnoxious bumper stickers. This is not normal, they all say, and you can see on some of your neighbors' cars if you live in a state like I do. Or that word that we used to hear every hour of the day when we were watching the news during Trump's first administration, unprecedented, which, by the way, I was the Daily Caller editor-in-chief over there at the time. I banned the word because I got news shit. No 25-year-old in the history has the right to use the word unprecedented. Almost everything has happened before. But you hear it all the time. And you know what? That word didn't appear in any coverage that I looked at. The LA Times didn't include it. They actually didn't even put it on their homepage. Granted, California has a lot of things going on. The New York Times put it in the bottom right of the fold. Just a blip. The Washington Post, even though it dedicated its homepage to all of that, also placed it where the New York Times placed it. Really, the only outlet that freaked out was CNN and Brian Stelter, who CNN just rescued from his apartment after 2 years of being laid off by them, to come back and just do kind of the same old thing that he was always doing and have his flip outs. And according to him, well, everyone else was noticing the flurry of executive actions, the sea change in government. Well, the founding editor of Politico was saying that, well, Donald Trump is still trying to become a good president. He is undeniably the greatest living statesman in America who defines this era. And everyone needs to understand that. He was out there saying, well, people are focusing on the wrong things, everyone except for us. That everybody they all live in these right-wing bubbles. But it turns out, bubble is his. And it's getting smaller and smaller. And so I tried to figure out the reasons. Why did, after years of flipping out over really minor things, did this sweeping pardon not receive the flip out that you'd expect? And I think there's a few. One, Donald Trump promised to do this. Very much unlike Joe Biden, which is another reason that people didn't flip out. He promised repeatedly that he was going to end this injustice. He was going to free people. He was going to review cases. He was going to pardon crimes. And you compare that to Joe Biden, by the way, who said repeatedly, and his allies said repeatedly, that they were not going to be issuing pardons for the Biden family. Well, that turned out to be a lie, and that also kind of slowed people down. Then you have the fact that the American people just, they kind of understand that this has been the largest DOJ operation in history, or one of the largest manhunts in history, all the way back to Bonnie and Clyde, and that even though some people did go to prison, and even though there were some bad people down there, it's been years of people being in prison. That there's a lot of folks in prison who maybe ought not to be in prison. That there's been overreach. That there's been lies by the government on this. These things, and at the same time, it all comes into what we've talked about the last 2 days, which is a newfound respect for Donald Trump. His political legitimacy has never been so high. Previously, Democrats, and John Harris writes this in his political essay, tried to dismiss him as fringe or as crazy or as outside the law or outside the norm, and that just hasn't worked, and it's not going to work. He's a great statesman. He's someone who needs to be listened to. All of those things came together and kind of just muted Democrat response.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting what you say, and I wonder if this is going to be a trend when it comes to a lot of the things that Trump does early on, or is this just the shock and awe of the first few days? But one thing I think we can say is true is that, and it does bear saying. I don't like switching things and saying, well, if the shoe was on the other foot, but it's helpful here. If this had happened to people on the left, there would already be mainstream Hollywood movies about the injustice, taking the best cases of the people who are treated the most unfairly. And some of the biggest actors and actresses in the country would be playing those roles and showing how this was unpatriotic, un-American, violation of the First Amendment. Like, all of that would be done, and these people would be lauded as heroes, and there would be lawsuits paying them millions of dollars for being treated like this. And we all know that. But what's interesting in this situation is it almost seems like you're saying maybe some people kind of sense that on the other side. And for whatever reason, rightly, whether you're right or wrong, they're not outright fighting it. Do you think this lasts? Is this part of a trend? Will this happen more or not?
I do think it's the last. I think it's shock and awe. If you look at these executive orders, this is actually unprecedented in modern political history. The number of executive orders signed on the first day, from one in his first term on his first day to 200 on his first day of his second term, is a massive shift. And Democrats are extremely good at fighting these sorts of things. They have the NGOs, often funded with money from taxpayers and money that the government fleeces from different corporations and lawsuits that they launch on the behest of these NGOs, and then they give the winnings back to the NGOs, and it powers this massive left-wing ecosystem. They're going to sue the heck out of everyone who's got anything to do with anything. You can't just eliminate, like Donald Trump did in an executive order last night, affirmative action, which LBJ signed into action with an executive order. You can't just change gender roles. You ought to be able to, and say that there's only man and woman without getting sued by these left-wing groups. But even the left does have somewhat finite resources and a finite level of lawyers. This is an overwhelming tidal wave of actions. It's not going to be millions of dollars. It's going to be billions and billions of dollars that need to be spent by the left to try and push back against establishing what exactly the authority of the executive is. I think, Matt, that our mutual friend John Yoo is probably going to find himself in rather high demand defending some of these things from the administration.
Yeah, Chris, I look at it and everybody's trying to kiss the ring, right? Everybody was in Washington, D.C. this weekend for all the inauguration, all the balls. Zuckerberg was there. Bezos was there, right? If you're anybody, now you want to be part of this Trump administration. And that's a different thing that we saw from 2016, right? Trump is now the cool guy, like you're saying. He's legitimate. It feels like that's also tied back into the J6 stuff, right? You don't see the lack of outrage because everybody's trying to be on the cool kids team.
It's wild, the change that we've seen. I think COVID had a lot to do with it. I think the fact that Democrats put up two of the least cool people in a row, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, and tried to act like they actually were really cool. Dark Joe Biden with his aviators and Brat Summer. The fact that Donald Trump literally is the funniest president ever caught on camera. We used to think that was Ronald Reagan because he told a couple wonderful dad jokes, like some really good stuff. But it turns out it's Donald Trump who's capable of making fun of himself, who goes into these strange places. Did you see his Truth Social post today? You could tell he had control over his own account. He just posted an AI image of him roaring next to a lion.
Him and the lion.
In the Serengeti.
Yes.
It was awesome. He was dancing with a sword on the stage. Mm-hmm. It's like if Berlusconi still had brain cells to knock together back in the day. He's a really funny and really omnipresent, someone who understands culture, someone who's been around culture for a long time, someone who can make fun of himself, someone who can make fun of his friends. He's a politician that the left is still just beginning to try to understand. And he actually I mean, call any black pillars you know. Call those people who are really down on the ability to save the republic, because it turned out that we had just begun to fight. And now that you're actually seeing those fights, we'll wait to see what the reactions are, see what the deep state does, what the NGOs that back them up do. It's a good moment. It's the beginning.
I saw my meme I like so much the most so far is Trump with the sword, and it says, "Well, you were swordjacking. I was learning the blade." It's pretty good stuff. I think that the cultural aspect here, it's so important that we just hammer this one home, because and it needs to you can't say this enough, and ultimately you have to do it. But the reason that the right wasn't cool, or the right was was not culturally effective, is because, in my mind, is so insecure. There's no authentic. People weren't authentic. They were trying. It's like the kid outside the party trying to get in. Like, oh, I can do that too. Well, what if the shoe is on the other foot? Bah. Democrats are the real
I'm the
racists.
conservative comedian.
Yeah,
I'm the conservative Gen Zer. It's like, why don't you just be a Gen Zer or a comedian?
exactly. It's not oh, Democrats the real racists. These people blah blah blah. It's saying no. We have our own identity. We know who we are. And this is what I want to do. And that's what Trump is like. And he's comfortable in his own skin, as our friend Matthew Peterson loves to point out. I mean, being comfortable in your own skin counts for everything, because you can't fake that. And so there's an authenticity of, no, if we think that immigration is actually a problem, right, legal immigration, then you say, well, what are all the things we would need to do to actually solve that problem? And if you're not doing that, you don't actually think it's a problem, right? You're insecure, or you're aping, you're pretending to be something you're not. And we've seen that disappear, and then the people are drawn to figures who are authentic and are just actually trying to do the thing. And that's what you see happening now. You see people saying, "Oh my gosh, well these people aren't fakers, They actually have beliefs, they have stuff they want to do. You can just do things. They're going out and doing them." Okay, that's number one.
And at the same time, the Democrats started to do what conservatives had always done. You had Matt Damon putting out movies about fracking. Like, previously,
Yes.
what made Hollywood so good was it just put out movies that had liberal values and liberal undertones in them. That was it. And as opposed to conservatives, you put out conservative film.
Right.
And that was the first message. Liberals started to put out liberal film, left-wing film, Democrat film. All of their messages put politics above entertainment, as opposed to taking a back seat. I mean, Matt Damon's movie about fracking absolutely bombed, because people didn't want to be hit with that. And that was just the beginning. It's on Jimmy Kimmel. It's on all the late nights, Stephen Colbert. Politics comes before entertainment. And that's just not fun. It's not entertaining.
Yes. And it's a key point, and you see it all over the place. It's exposed itself. It's gotten so bad where they're not trying to do the thing, and whatever the thing is, they're not just trying to be a comedian and make me laugh. They're not trying to movie keep me entertained. They're trying to do this politicized thing and jump up and down for their masters and say, "Look at me, I deserve more jobs because I agree with you." And it's slavish. It's not fitting for human beings, and it's not cool, and it's not attractive because of how slavish it is. Now, the second thing I want to throw out there for you guys, and it's the importance of Chris's point here, is that it's not just that Trump is authentic in this way and unafraid and comfortable in his own skin. It also is, as Chris pointed out, that he is very good at media. Because he's been in media for a long time and a star, and The Apprentice made a lot of money for very good reason. And so there, I think, is another lesson that you just see over and over again, actually the right adopting with the memes and everything else. This is a facile use of media. I mean, right now the left is complaining, "Oh my gosh, these podcasts, and Joe Rogan's a fascist, and they have this whole network, and it's a big conspiracy." And there's no conspiracy. There's just a number of people who are good at media, who are doing the thing, and they're out there, and people are drawn to them.
They were mad at talk radio because they didn't have a Rush Limbaugh. They couldn't figure out how he was so good at what he did, and that nobody else could step up on the left and do that. The left can't meme. They're not funny enough to go through and do this. They don't actually, it's not like the true beliefs that they can figure it out and connect that with humor. They don't have that ability. But Chris, what do you think? Is it all just fun and games with all the memes and everything?
No, it's grown into the broader culture. Yeah. It's essential. It's something it's rebellion. And I was wondering how long it was going to take. It's been shocking to see the different subcultures that still call themselves rebels, how actually whenever you see crews of them, how much they are wearing the badges and the paraphernalia of the liberal regime, which is staunchly in control. It seemed to it lagged for a while, but youth often rebel against a system that oppresses them, and the system that they had over the last couple of years is oppressive. I remember talking to other parents and worrying, hey, we rebelled against the system, but we didn't grow up in a system that told us it's bad to be a male, it's bad to be a white, it's bad to be a cis, I guess, it's bad to be straight, it's bad to not mutilate your body. That makes you somewhat just more of a normie who's basic. We didn't grow up in that, and the rebellion that would have come out of us would have been tenfold. Now, fortunately, this youthful generation seems to have tampered down a little bit. Maybe they just popped in a Zin and decided they were going to vote for Donald Trump and make some memes and make fun of everything. But the rebellion against the stifling woke Puritanism, and it's totally descendant from Massachusetts Puritanism. I hate to besmirch my own people, but that's where this comes from, this whole thing, this whole concept of unforgivable sin that you've committed that must be constantly and publicly atoned for. It's so uncool and so stifling that the young voters have completely rejected it. And that's who decides what is popular in culture, not me.
All right, when we're talking about culture, the thing that sticks out in my mind was my weekend in DC at the Starlight Ball, because all of the boxers, if you were a boxer, you were there, right? Mike Tyson was on one of the Paul brothers' shoulders, like up in the air above everybody else. That's what's going to stick out to me about this weekend. That and just how, even if they couldn't go, the people, of course, couldn't sit outside on the lawn with 100,000 chairs. It was all moved indoors for the inauguration itself. Everybody was still out in the streets. They were still excited to be there. We talked to them when we were going from event to event, and just the excitement, right? So taking back the culture with the boxers and all the excitement in the streets. Bedford, what are you going to remember most about this weekend?
How about all the connections to Mike Tyson? Everybody who's made a couple $1 million on beating up Mike Tyson or gotten their ear bitten off by Mike Tyson, been in the movie with Mike Tyson, seems to have all been here. I mean, one of my takeaways also was the great and super intelligent decision that I had to not follow you people to those balls, those freezing cold conditions where you nearly went the way of the Donner Party. The stories next morning sounded like you were ready to eat each other in a pass and die in those frigid conditions, whereas I, in my wisdom, was drinking beer at the Tune Inn.
The worst part about it is we were separated. Peterson and I weren't even at the same part of town. We went to different locations, so we couldn't even carpool together on the way back.
Not all of us could make it to the fanciest ball,
Sorry.
but Elegant Jill did, and it didn't matter, both of us, wherever we were or not. The end of that night, for many people, they will remember the rest of their lives for the cluster of the logical cluster, explosion of disaster and freezingness at the end. That was the only unpleasant thing about the weekend, however. Everything else about it was incredible, most especially all the people coming together and swirling around. And I mean, it's like we said the other day.
Such a vibe shift.
The Tucker Christmas movie, I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
That's what it looks like.
Friends of mine were talking. He showed up at a hotel bar, and was hanging out with people. This is like the kind of place where everyone knows your name. You're meeting all the people from all over the country are mingling. Now, I do think this shows the potential for something like what the Democrats have pulled off since time immemorial now, where it just becomes the dominant culture is a healthy one, right? And it's not the case yet. I don't want to make too much of it. It's like we have the boxers, we have a couple, we have the early forces assembling. But what it shows you is the possibility maybe of a majority culture that is much, much healthier than the one we have now.
Bedford, one final word.
I agree. I mean, 2 years ago, I didn't think that there was enough. I didn't think I would see a Republican president, even Donald Trump, come in and be able to tackle this in the way it needed. And I didn't think that even if he did, the culture would back him. I thought the American people might not want some of the stuff that is going to be required to fix us. And we're still, by the way, have a lot of that to sort out. But these last couple of days in particular have given me a lot of hope.
Yeah, there's a lot of energy right now. There's a lot of hope, and we need it because this is going to be a big fight, and we'll be documenting it here in Bedford. You'll be a huge part of that. So we'll catch you again soon.
I'll see you tomorrow.
Don't go anywhere, because we're going to look at if Trump can actually dismantle this deep state, and we're going to get the voice of the people to weigh in next. We told you about Blaze News, the mandate. Actually, Matthew Peterson broke the news over on Glenn Beck's program when we were still in Washington, D.C. And here we are delivering the first one. It's exciting to look ahead and see everything that we're about to be able to do here.
Yeah, I mean, this is, I mean, just as we're doing it, feeling the energy of, everything that just occurred in Washington, D.C., and the focus of the entire country on really the most important thing politically, which is whether or not he can do this, whether or not he and his administration can come in and roll this thing back. And to be able to have the privilege of being here, talking about that every night and focusing on it is going to be incredible. We're going to bring in all kinds of experts and, a little new structure to the show. So in the beginning, Jill is going to run down the agenda.
Yeah, we're going to make sure that everybody, there's going to be so many good things that Donald Trump says, right? We know we have to document that. That is all part of the fun as well. And then get right into a deep dive interview with somebody that is a subject matter expert, right? The confirmation hearings are going on right now. They're attacking Pete Hegseth, Brett Kavanaugh, anyone, right? We want to go in and look at that and say, why are they doing this? Who is doing this and why?
Yeah, and it's important that we explain along the way, and we all learn together who does rule us and how. Because let me tell you, you can think you're really smart and be very educated, right, in this country, or people who are very connected and have a boatload of money. No one, I mean, almost no, everyone has the same question. Who actually is ruling me? Who are these people, and how do they do it? Because it doesn't matter who we vote in and out, right? Well, that's what the Trump administration is going to try to stop, and that's what we're going to come every night prepared to show you and go a little deeper with people who know what they're talking about and can explain, here's what RFK is going to do to make America healthy again, but here's how the FBA has been run, right? Here's the hierarchy there. Here's the obstacle. They can't just go in and fire everyone. What are they going to do? That's the kind of thing we need to do in the spotlight, and put in the spotlight and show who the good and bad guys are and explore.
Yeah, and give the props to some of the good guys, because I don't think that we're that good at doing that in conservative media. So we want to make sure that you do point out when people do things good. But I think, unfortunately, there are going to be a lot more people doing bad things that'll be prominently featured on this show as well. But then we want to hear from you as well. So every episode, we're going to try and go through some question and answer. I put a poll out on X earlier today. Let's go ahead and take a look at this, because I was asking, how likely is it that Donald Trump will successfully dismantle the deep state over the next 4 years? And actually, somewhat likely was the big winner at 49%, not likely up next, and then very likely followed by no chance. So the black pills are at the very bottom, as they should be right now, because people are still riding high. But 49% of people right now saying that it is somewhat likely, at least, that Donald Trump will dismantle the deep state. Yeah,
look, it's really important, as Jill's saying, that we hear from everyone out there a lot more and have more interaction with our audience, so we can bring you what you want. So you're into the show, you like what we're saying, on Twitter's probably the best, easiest way now to throw in some questions, and Jill's going to be saying a lot more back and forth online and otherwise, and we'll bring your comments and questions to the show and answer them. I think with the poll, that strikes me as, I don't know how representative it is, but it does strike me as representative. About a third of people are just black-pilled, saying, you know what, 6% say no chance. The rest are like, yeah, not likely. And that's okay. At the bar, around the bar, there's like a third of people are just kind of grumpy old men, and they're like, this is impossible. And that's plausible because it hasn't happened yet, right? And then you get the other people like, well, I actually am cautiously optimistic. Right? I think that we ran into a lot of the people that voted very likely in Washington, D.C. this weekend. They were very excited in our nation's capital this weekend. But then we're going to end the show because Matthew Peterson is so smart. He knows all the people, all the players that are connected. And I want him to leave us with some action steps every day, or just some final thoughts, because there is so much going on. And there's right now, just why should they watch the show? What's the reasoning behind this? Well, what we want to do at the end is especially point out anything that you can do or I can do to actually take action, as Jill's saying, in the midst of this great battle. But the first thing that we should talk about in the very first show where we talk about the mandate is that the first action everyone needs to take is just awareness and understanding. We have to understand what the real issues are politically. We got to get out of this mindset of what we're talking about is rooting for, we're cheerleading Republicans and Democrats. This is really about refounding America. I mean, Glenn Beck just today called Donald Trump a refounder. This has already been refounded, this country, in a way where they really bent the original Constitution out of whack and almost out of recognition. So until we recognize that fact, which I know many of our audience does, then the question is, what do we do about that? And the first thing we have to do is understand the situation we're in order to be responsible citizens and to know who to vote for, right? But also a lot of other action steps that we can take throughout our life. And the problem with the rest of mainstream media today is that they're not focused on what's really important. They don't care about, getting rid of this agency at the State Department that actually was getting rid of free speech throughout the country. They're not going to chase down those details. And even many other conservative media outlets, they're sort of like here today with the headlines and whatever's going on. And it's all shiny object syndrome. We don't care about that because we know what you don't care about that because what you care about, same thing we care about, which is Donald Trump and his administration going to be able to implement the mandate that this entire nation just gave them? And that's the only thing that matters. And that's why we will focus on that in every way. And we'll entertain and educate as we go. So I'm just, honored, privileged to be here and to be focused on this. And I think that, we're going to see some amazing things in the next few years together. But at the end of the day, none of it matters unless that mandate is implemented. So let me say this, finally, and this is what's important, I think, to all of us. At the end of the day, the administration itself will need to be held accountable. At the end of the day, it's not even about Donald Trump, as incredible a figure, as a statesman as he has become and is becoming before our eyes. It's about the mandate of the people and whether or not Trump is able to affect it. And, as they move forward, we will keep an eye on all of that. And we will keep an eye on whoever doesn't have their back. And we'll look at who the good and bad guys are as this great battle unfolds before us.
America is about to celebrate her 250th birthday. It's going to be a great thing. But one of the things that we've learned over that period of time is that you have to call things out by name, right? Ronald Reagan called the axis of evil what it was. Donald Trump famously goes out there and says fake news, right? You have to say this is wrong and this is right. And that's one of the things that we're going to try to do here on this show and just make sure, because this is going to be a very small window of time that we have in the history of this 250 years. This is going to be some of the most important days, weeks, months, and hopefully years that we can push back against that administrative state.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly right. And this is crunch time. And it's not over. It's just beginning. But the great thing about it is it's going to be an amazing and, dare I say, volatile journey. And that's what's so exciting about it. And you are needed. You are needed. You have to be aware and be a responsible citizen to support Trump and what he's trying to do.
The volatility will still increase. If you want to go ahead and subscribe to Blaze News, The Mandate, we would love for you to do that. Be sure to share the show with everybody as well so we can get the word out, and we will break it all down here tomorrow night.
Go Bills.